Do you like fighting?
Yep.
Do you like killing?
Live for it.
Do you like fear?
It's time for you to sleep.
Can't say. Never felt it. It's game time!
No More Heroes is the kind of game that proves a wealth of charm and atmosphere can overwhelm an ultimately middling gameplay loop and super underwhelming mechanics. Since I want to focus on those good points, we'll be doing the reverse of what I did in my Undertale video. So let's get the lousy stuff out of the way so we can articulate why this is one hell of a cult classic. Let's not beat the meat on this one. No More Heroes combat is not good. Now, it's not like people are reviewing this game for the swordplay, but they're a little quick to just dismiss the combat as middling, so allow me to bring the hammer down a little harder here. This was originally a Wii game, one that came out hardly a year into the console's life cycle. So instead of learning from the already existing greats like Devil May Cry, God of War, and God Hand, it took a page from the newly burgeoning trend of motion controls. Okay, so I'm not going to be too hard on motion controls. It was exciting for the time, but was still a gimmick that is hardly seen in games today. The motion control style is still in the Switch port of No More Heroes, but the charm has worn out by now. There's not much reason for it. So what happens when we switch to the Pro Controller? All the holes begin to show. Enemies almost always will be coming at you from one direction, so the same strategy will work 85% of the time. Hammer that A button to automatically stun lock the enemy in front of you. High or low only matters in activating a clash, which you are not going to fail anyway, and it just kills the enemy faster. Starting to get crowded, just dodge backwards once and the enemies will either line up for you or get clustered up more conveniently and they're easily dispatched. And these arrow finishes that show up once an enemy's health bar is drained only really amount to crowd control, as they'll sometimes knock down or kill enemies that are close to them. This is all compounded by poor enemy variety. You have generic melee boys at various levels of durability, guys with katanas, which are a little bit faster, but they don't do a lot of damage. And then you have the gunmen. God damn the gunmen. They're the closest thing to difficult against the normal encounters, because they stun lock you from a distance. Sound fun? Oh, and they run away from you the instant you get close. So just bun rush them, side dodge if they try to shoot, and watch as the melee enemies be helpless against you because they can't hit you if they're moving. And lastly, you have fellow beam katana users. These guys are alright. They're immune to hit stun, so you have to watch their patterns and when they're gonna hit you. I just wish they were utilized more against the normal mooks because they typically appear only by themselves near the end of an encounter. Except near the end where they launch 4 or 5 of them at once, because hard is hard, right? And that's not to say it doesn't feel good. The sound of your impacts and totally not lightsaber keep this from being an absolute snooze fest. And that final swing on enemies is a good sense of timing and visceral feedback. It's just that the mechanical investment just isn't there like it is for other action games. And the fatty combat is only made fattier by the gameplay loop it's set in. Our main goal is outlined by our hero Travis in both the intro and first boss cutscene.
I just want to be number one.
And to climb the UAA's leaderboards, you're going to need to bypass a lot of cache barriers. Well, how do we get the cache? Well, each chapter, I guess you can call them, will have you start with a normal-ass job. You know, things like pumping gas, cleaning graffiti, jumping the shark, the usual white-collar stuff. Finishing these tasks will unlock assassination missions. While this loop isn't bad in and of itself, the amount of grinding you will have to do gets really tedious really fast. Not so much the amount you need to progress in the story, that's fine. It's the additional upgrades you'll need to prevent the bosses from being a total dragfest. The gym and Naomi's lab offer nothing beyond number boosts. There's no autonomy or choice here. Either you have them, or the next fight is going to drag out longer than it already is. And you also have the Lovey Cove balls, the only real collectible on this open world sandbox. Getting 7 of these will let you go to the bar and unlock a new technique, though this really amounts to 2 actual new techniques. The other 5 just amount to more number changes. Doubling the duration of that super mode that is based off a slot machine? No. Extending your grab, useful, but wrestling suplexes are only really helpful against the bosses and slow down combat at other times. Seeing enemies on the map, worthless. Letting you dash out of combat, useful, but it's not a fighting move. But I guess it does cut down on time, so okay. When I said there was only really 2 new physical techniques, I actually only meant 1. The jumping down slash only really extends your range on finishing downed enemies, which is a button prompt. Leaving the jumping slash the only real move, and it's fairly broken. It makes a total joke out of the beam katana enemies. You know, the guys that were clearly meant to be a test of your abilities are rendered completely useless because they always go down in 1 slash. And no, not many players will know about this on their first go around. I don't consider it a good mark of game design when discovering things makes me think less of it, not more. Alright, I don't know about you guys, but I've had enough of being a negative sheep. I could go into more details about how the sandbox is lame and hardly has any reason to exist beyond Russian balls. Or how the wrestling moves are cool lore-wise, but don't add anything substantial to the combat. But that's not what you're here for. No, you want your love for a game to be reaffirmed by a guy on YouTube. You want to know how a game's 3rd installment could make me go, "Yes, my dick!" Well, obviously, it's pussy that gets me jiving. So let's take a better look at it, shall we?
You hungry? There.
You can't really begin to articulate the successes of No More Heroes without frontlining the biggest one, the bosses. There are 10 of these duders, and they are some of the most unique cast of psychos ever printed onto a game disc. Their variety speaks for themselves, and their build-up is just as excellent. In a way, the mechanical deficiencies of all your stat building and upgrading work better towards building these guys up. I don't want to go there, but the game really makes you feel like a dopey otaku loser. Not that it had to try very hard for most of us, but still. Each chapter has you doing mundane jobs, getting into seedier low-grade assassinations, going to the gym for your routine, getting mods for your beam katana, and finally playing with your cat before you head off to climb the ladder. Because it very well could be the last time you get to see her. Yeah, I wasn't kidding, this pussy kinda embodies the charm of this game. Then beyond that, you go through a small gauntlet of baddies, slicing your way through people who could very well want that rank before you. An ominous phone call from your benefactor? Agent? And then one of those awesome transitions, and then the showdown happens. Such good stuff. And then the bosses themselves don't disappoint. You don't get to know a whole lot about them before they get axed, but there's plenty to chew on. From death metal's Nirvana and possible melancholy from getting everything he ever wanted, Bad Girl's murdering becoming so routine now that she's become a depraved serial killer, and my favorite, Destroy Man, someone who uses their profession as a killer to quell their frustration from their profession as a, mailman? My favorite touch is the room shaking around him, symbolizing his faltering mental state and possible power output. It's especially impressive how, well, restrained these guys are. This was 2007, Ted Random was all the rage, and they could have easily gone too far in the wacky department. But you get the feeling these guys are products of their profession, reacting to it and Travis in different ways based on their own upbringing. Not to say some one-liner to be printed on your local Hot Topic t-shirt. If you want to see that crystallized, check out No More Heroes 2. We'll get to that someday, but, well, that's your example of what this game could have been. The varied and colorful bosses serve as a contrast to the environments. For all the weirdness on display, it's all based in a pretty mundane world. In a way, the world of Santa Destroy is the straight man for a bunch of mentally disturbed characters. You're fighting in places like abandoned buildings, beaches, movie studios, and baseball stadiums. The assassins are allowed to pick their arenas. In a way, they're also picking the last place they'll ever be alive in. This somber tone is felt most with Dr. Peace. His somber monologue telling us how, for all of the material things that being an assassin has afforded him, it couldn't wash away the awful things he has done, no matter how much he tries to hide it.
Now, how could I refuse such a kind offer?
Courtesy of me and my entry fee, no doubt.
My ex-wife called me the other day, and I met my daughter for the first time in 10 years. We dined at a fancy restaurant, one of those that are impossible to get a reservation for. And then afterwards, karaoke.
Who got you the reservation?
The association took care of it, of course.
Fuck. My entry fee.
What's important is not the fact the reservations are hard to get. In fact, no one gets reservations. The words reservations only apply only to those outside of the circle. It's getting into that circle that matters.
And the food. Good?
Unfortunately, the atmosphere was a facade. Not once did my own daughter look me in the eye.
The game really doesn't try to sugarcoat the morose, grim implications of this guy's work. Except when all of it gets undermined for the third act's big twist. And we're back to the irksome stuff. But only for a bit, I promise. Before the final fight, you call up the agency after Sylvia, your informant and love interest, starts acting distant and weird. You end up ringing her mother, who reveals...
And there's no such thing as an association, or whatever you think exists.
You're joking, right?
Now, I think if they fleshed this twist out, it would have worked. Having all of your bloodshed, all of your ladder climbing and anime fighting being for nothing but to line the pockets of a con artist, it does kind of fit the morbid aesthetics of the game. But even within the confines of this one title, it feels like an afterthought that it even itself doesn't honor. First of all, if Sylvia is
The professional con artist.
wouldn't her targets be more on the ritzy end? I know nothing of con artistry, but it feels like an excessive, elaborate amount of work to hire so many people willing to throw their lives away, renting out giant parts of the city for death matches, all in case a single otaku simp is indeed willing to wire you what's essentially a week's pay at McDonald's every few days into your bank account? It just doesn't gel. And it especially doesn't gel when you get to the final fight itself. It's a bait and switch where this whole journey ends up being an elaborate training regimen to prep Travis for a grudge match against the woman who killed his parents, Jean. So is this not a con anymore? Because it sounds like Sylvia is actually providing a service for Travis. Is she out to help Travis on a whim, or is she just in it for the cash? Kind of a lot of elbow grease to look into the tragic backstory of some rando you found at a bar. I think it would have worked way better if Jean was just the #1 ranked assassin from the get-go, and the association was a legit organization Sylvia was a part of. Make her an unscrupulous exploiter who adds fees that aren't there to Travis's build to get both sides of the coin working. As it stands, it's better off ignoring the twists. The sequels sure as hell do.
Let's go!
Derek Alexander once described the game Clash at Demon Head as a poorly recorded, poorly EQ'd punk rock classic. And this fits No More Heroes to a T. Koichi Suda and his crew at Grasshopper didn't know how to make a masterful action game like God of War or Devil May Cry. And their insistence on putting it on a console who's based on a gimmick hurt the game's longevity more than helped it. It didn't stop this game from being a grungy classic with a lot of heart. I'll always remember playing through it during the summer of 2008. AC on full blast as I slash through dudes like a kid who buys decorative samurai swords at the flea markets and then brags about them at his friends at school. With an easily accessible Switch port, there's no better way to get into this franchise before the third game hits this August. This has been Crispy the Sheep.
I know. Too bad there won't be a sequel.